Officially, hi everybody. Now everybody can see us and hear us. And some random geek I see got us started in the live chat by typing penis. Just so everybody knows. Just so everybody knows, for the last 2 minutes before we went live, it was like a series of people just saying penis back and forth. Mostly Brockman, but everybody else. Not everybody else. Some of us have a little bit of dignity.
Phallus.
Phallus. There you go. Phallus. Thank you. Anyway, hi everybody. So now let's go ahead. Let's try to kill an hour. I'm sure it won't be a problem.
Pillage, loot, and rape and burn with all moderation. If you do the things they say, you'll soon control the nation. First kill all your enemies and then kill their relations. Pillage, loot, and rape and burn, all in moderation. With thanks to the Society for Creative Anachronism.
Yes.
My computer almost died recently.
Oh, no.
This PC that I built together in November, I was producing a video, and in the timeline, apparently the clips were so big that the program used up all of my RAM, and things just started shutting down and not working for several restarts. It's all working just fine now, probably because I bought 2 more sticks of RAM, so now I'm operating at 32 gigs, which I really should have.
Yeah.
But it's never happened before. Making a video almost killed it.
Wow.
The darndest thing is, though, I changed some of the files. Like, this is something that some people do, is they'll use proxies, where, it's basically the same, but the bit rate is much, much smaller, so it looks crappy. And then when they're ready to render it, they'll just switch them out for the real files. But like I just said, mine was so big that it almost killed my computer. So I changed them from uncompressed MOVs to MP4s, and even the size and the bit rate was around the same. But for some reason, my video editor didn't use nearly as much RAM, so it really was down to the file type. I guess it was just, I don't know. It's just such a stupid thing to happen. Really, that's why my computer almost died, because my editing software is just poorly optimized for this one file type, but this type is perfectly okay.
Nick, I'll tell you what, one thing I do all the time, and it's actually come in pretty handy. I'm only running 8 gig, got only 8 gig.
I know, right?
I'll tell you what. But seriously, I always keep a copy of the task manager in my lower right-hand corner. Okay. And just being able to see how much memory I'm consuming is occasionally handy, because I frequently have several browsers open, several browser windows open. Because I put them into groups. I'm doing this, I'm doing that, I'm doing the other. I got YouTube, I got Atheist Nexus, I got this, that, and the other. And it's handy that way, because one thing I've noticed is the second I start getting much above 6.5 gig, the more things start bogging down a little bit, because it's getting close to the limit.
You remember when 8 gigs used to be considered a lot?
I remember when 32K used to be considered a lot.
I remember when 64 bits was
60,
a big thing. 64 bits in big thing, console gaming.
Let's see. Back in the days of the PDP-8, we used to, when I worked for Warner and Swayze, we had CNC control systems that were run by a PDP-8, either the A or the M. The M was cool because it had all the bits laid out, and on-off switches in front of you, along with the lights to show what bit was asserted and what wasn't. But that was a 32 kilobyte magnetic core memory computer. And it was terrific until you had a heavy electric transient go off anywhere near it, because there was sufficient electromagnetic pulse in that to scramble the memory, whereupon you pulled out not a DVD, not a CD, or a tape. You pulled out paper tape. Whew. And you ran it through a paper tape reader and reloaded the memory. This is back in the late 70s and the early 80s. This was the technology of the time.
Think back when you're watching classic Doctor Who, with Tom Baker and K9, and the ticker tape it is. Even someone like me, I'd have to go, what the hell is a ticker tape?
I just remembered something so embarrassing. So when I was younger, when I was a kid, I was first getting into video games. I didn't understand the 64-bit, 32-bit, etc. So when you had all these games like Mario 64, Donkey Kong 64, I thought there had literally been 63 games before.
They kind of jumped ahead. How'd they go from Super Mario 3 to Super Mario 64? That's
imagine what an awful naming scheme. Imagine if a few years later they made something like the GameCube. It's like Mario 128.
This is confusing.
I mean, there's Final Fantasy 10-2 and Final Fantasy 12, and that's not even
There's
getting
also
into
Final
like
Fantasy 11.
And Final Fantasy 11,
Is
and not even getting
PC
into like
Master Race a
Kingdom
curse
Hearts.
thing here? Is it like forbidden?
What?
Like, is PC Master Race forbidden?
No. How else?
Conversation.
We're not. I mean, we are doing this call not on our GameCubes or our Game Boys.
I am too young for that stuff. I started my gaming with a PC. You know.
Yeah.
I mean, you're talking to a guy who actually played Pong on an Atari 2600. So.
Hey, the first console I probably played on was the Radio Shack Caddy 800 color computer.
Oh man, we had those.
Did not have one of those.
We got those in elementary school, and they were the biggest deal ever. When our computer lab in elementary school, when I was, I guess, in 4th grade maybe, so I was 8 or 9. We got like a grant from the state, and they upgraded our school computer lab to all Tandy computers, full color monitors, and it was like, wow, we're like living in a Star Trek show all of a sudden because
Windows XP was very Star Trek for me, like the original series.
Yeah.
Front page news when our school got Apple IIe's.
Oh yeah,
that's what we were upgrading from.
Well, in addition to having having an original Atari 2600 and having played an original Pong machine, but when my first actual computer was a Timex Sinclair 1000, 2K of RAM on board, and I had the add on the RAM packs and bumped you up to 16K.
Yeah.
The only video games I've ever had was I remember because I guess my parents were not really into that for me, but they gave me like a Nintendo 64 like in the late 90s, and I got a PS2, but I barely play it. So
well, that's the opposite of my. Sorry, let me finish.
No, I was saying when it comes to technology, I'm kind of still stuck in the 90s, so I don't really know much about this new stuff because I'm just.
Well, growing up, the reason we got the Nintendo, even though me and my brothers love playing like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and like all the other games, we played it so our mom didn't have to like waste quarters on gauntlets.
I had.
Oh, go ahead.
I had I think. If I'm trying to remember, I think I've got the only 2 proper gaming consoles I've ever owned are I owned an NES that my parents got for me like right before Super Nintendo came out. So it was like right at the end of the NES era. And then the next one was a PS2 that I got myself as an adult. And that was also the last one because I think I gave that. I had that for like 2 years and I gave it away to somebody because I was like, I don't play this anymore. But so those are the only 2. But my mom used to work at a video store in town, and they had 2 arcade games, and one of them was WWF Superstars. And I don't even want to think about how much money I spent on that game. I would go every day after school and just every quarter in my pocket just pump it right into the machine. It was amazing.
Nerd.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure.
One thing that just confounds me in recent years is games that just want so desperately to be movies, where you just get the feeling that the writers, the people behind people like David Cage, wish that they were working in Hollywood and are embarrassed to be stuck with such a juvenile medium as video games.
With me, I've been listening back to I'm sorry, Lauren. I've been listening back to Podquisition, hosted by Jim Sterling. Thank God for him. And he does an impression of David Cage almost every other episode. Oh, this video game has emotions, and if you have emotions, you will understand my artistic creativity with these video games. But yet, even when you look at David Cage's video games, even for like a movie, they're kind of lame movies. The themes or anything that they do is not like revolutionary or anything like that. It's just a B movie in video game form. It'd be better if they're like more video gamey, honestly.
And in my case, I mean, the one thing I keep going back to is Doom and Doom 2, in which case the game is infinitely better than the movie was.
Well, that's the thing, because like when you
put the rock into the game, and then you've got something.
There you go.
I mean, there's some entertainment value in like Doom at least and stuff like that, but that's the problem with like the video game movies that they try to make. They just like make movies they already know how to make, like Max Payne, the bad cop movie. They just remake that and have a video game license attached to it and stuff like that. And plus, also, it's like that's the thing about the medium of like video game in storytelling. It's a different way of telling story. It's interactive. You really gotta like think of it not the other way, which is why I think when like video game industry people and companies try to bring in Hollywood writers to like write for video games, they kind of just like write movies and then they try to fit that movie into the video game, and it's like sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, and sometimes when the writing team comes in like at the tail end of the production cycle, you feel like they shoehorn in the story like in the first Mirror's Edge,
which is what they did in the first place. I just want to throw one last thing in. Here's the latest console. I think we got I've forgotten how my wife got it, but I think we've got a PlayStation something or other in the spare bedroom, which I think I've played on all of maybe 2 or 3 times. But we've got a Wii, WII, and I must confess to this.
I always thought they were called Y.
Whatever. But
I think that's what they're
the Wii was
Why?
the only console I ever had.
I think that's what their detractors call them.
Why?
In any case, one of the things I still enjoy doing is playing 9 holes of golf. I mean, I couldn't play the real game to save my life, and I love watching the PGA and watch these guys just make shots that sort of make you go, what? But I mean, I can honestly claim that I'm a scratch golfer on the Wii, but that's the only place I ever will be.
Well, and that's the one thing. What's kind of cool about the games where they have the motion thing, so you could actually kind of so instead of just sitting there with a joystick where you actually had to move around, and it's like, so this way you could play a game and feel maybe a little less guilty about it because you're actually getting some exercise. We did buy some things like that. They didn't last because I don't really like the the PS. Was it PS2 I had? Still have PS3. I don't like the controllers because I'm old school, man. I'm Atari 2600, 5200, 7800. And I remember like a friend of mine got ColecoVision, and I was so jealous because the ColecoVision graphics are so much better than the 2600.
I remember those.
I remember the ColecoVision.
I was going to say, I think, right, I don't expect game adaptations to be good movies for the same reason I don't expect operas to make good plays. Right?
That's a good
plots that are designed usually right around letting so a bunch of star singers do a range of different vocal acrobatics. So you have these plots that veer from happy to tragic, and okay, well, this, you look at it on paper, you say, well, this plot is absurd. You say, well, yeah, because the plot is built to facilitate this range of vocal display. And so, if you take it out of that context, it's not going to work. And in the same way, right?
Oh, it's like Cats.
It's what I think.
But musicals can't work.
Cats works as a musical either, but right, you take it out of the context.
Exactly.
It's designed for. Yeah, of course, it's not going to work as this other thing. These plots that are designed to give you a bunch of little interactive activities to do, of course, are stupid.
But there's the thing, though, because video games can definitely tell narrative, and you can easily do that with mechanics. James from the channel Extra Credits, it was a bit of a creep, actually, honestly, but that's another thing, did that in an old video essay about Missile Command, how that game tells the narrative of you being the one missile operator trying to save like all these different cities on this nondescript like West Coast or something like the city from disaster of being bombed in. The developer himself actually had, after developing that game, had nightmares of if that would happen on San Francisco Bay, because that's where he lived in the Bay Area and stuff like that. Yeah. And that's became more vivid for him, and that's the proof that like video games can definitely tell a narrative. It's not the same as plot.
Story, absolutely. Course, a long time ago, I brought up the old Infocom games, which were purely text only, but whoever wrote those games wrote some wonderful stuff. I mean, I remember relating to you guys the story of the woman whose face was wrong. You know, something had twisted her Oriental features into a terrible mask because she had been a victim of Nagasaki and survived it. And just that, A Mind Forever Voyaging, and even Leather Goddesses of Phobos. I mean, you love to read this stuff because whoever wrote it, wrote it from the heart.
Oh, and it's great camp. I mean, the thing that gets me too is like with some bad translations. To me, the worst one that I can think of was Battleship, because it's basically when you try to take a game mechanic that is about a game mechanic and is simulating something completely different in the real world, and then you try to go. So it's kind of like, if you remember the sketch, the recurring sketch on SNL, where the lounge singer, she sang songs that were translated from English into French and then back into English. That's literally what you're trying to do. It's like, so because Battleship is basically the idea that, okay, you're scanning, you're trying to simulate, using your sensing devices to figure out where the target was. And so you have these things, and then they try to make it literal where, these things are getting launched out. And it's like, no, that doesn't work. It's so stupid.
Well, it's the perils of adaptation. I mean, it's like,
but
that's everything. There are things about video games as a storytelling medium that are different from other media, but it's still the perils of adaptation. I mean, it's difficult to adapt a novel into a movie if you don't know what you're doing, or if you can't figure out how to represent what's on the page on the screen in a good way. I mean,
and also what to take from a novel to the movie, and what would be filler in a movie, but is part of the novel. And
Tom Bombadil in Return and Fellowship of the Ring. Like I know people who are so upset that wasn't included. I'm like, that wouldn't have worked in a movie, because you have this chase scene and everything's going on, and then they just stop and they frolic for a bit with this like flighty dude which in a book, in a long book that you're reading, gives you a nice respite, and but in a movie would just completely fall apart and kill the pacing.
No, besides, in a movie, you just need like one line or one joke to like kill the tension, as it were, something like that. Like C-3PO just like, help! I think I'm melting. Go ahead, Nick.
Sorry, I was gonna say like Tom Bombadil. Okay, imagine if he had been included in the movie for like 20 minutes on top of an already 3-hour-long movie. So imagine, you have all this buildup. They set out on their quest. They know what they got to do. And then they run into this guy and it's like, oh, what's that there? And, like he takes the ring and he just looks at it and they're like, no, don't. It's evil. It'll corrupt your mind and all that. It's like, whatever, dude. Because it doesn't affect him. He's like the only person in the world because I guess he's God or something. And it's just... in the movie that would have been something. But in the movie that would have been terrible, because any tension that get built up for like that entire first hour would immediately dissolve.
Right.
The audience wouldn't be able to take it remotely seriously, because hey, this random guy they found in the woods, perfectly fine. Why doesn't he just take it to Mordor?
Right. and that's the thing,
because one does not just go into Mordor.
That's the thing. And in fact, in the book, they even, at one point, when they're in the Council of Elrond, they actually talk about, that Tom Bombadil is powerful enough to hold it and not be corrupted. And they're like, yeah, but you know what? He's so flighty, he'll just drop it somewhere because he doesn't care. And then the agents of darkness can get it back because he'll just he won't be responsible with it because he's just kind of this trippy dippy guy.
Yeah, it can be challenging. It can be challenging to adapt a novel, especially a lengthy one, into a single movie. Because Joe kind of mentioned it, kind of hit on it a little bit, where if you're reading a long book, like there are a lot of people, especially if it's a good book, like you enjoy a nice long book, and it doesn't matter if it takes you days to finish reading it, or like it's a journey and it's an experience, and it's just it's a great pleasure to read a good long book.
Make a meal out of it.
Yeah, exactly.
I actually I got a lot of Star Trek TNG novels.
Yeah.
Which to me like better expand the universe of Star Trek: The Next Generation, because it's always the episodes, but then the novels exist, so you can further go in depth.
Well, yeah, the novels can indulge in more detail.
Yeah, well, because a movie, and even more so a TV episode, but a movie is more analogous to a short story. because a movie is designed to be taken in a single sitting. And sort of the old rule of thumb as a writer is if you're writing a short story should be short enough in theory that you can read it in a single sitting. Some short stories are too long to do that, and it depends on, how people's reading pace and, whatever's going on. But generally speaking, the rule is a short story should be short enough that you can read it in a single sitting. And that's much more analogous to a movie, because that's what a movie is. In theory, you're supposed to sit down, watch the movie. You're not supposed to stop halfway through and get up and go do something else. You're supposed to watch the movie from beginning to end. And it can be a challenge to adapt, like kind of what Tanya was saying earlier. You have to know like what to take out. Because if you're writing a movie, and I'm as people who listen to the Late Seating podcast know, I am a huge stickler for running time. Like, I mean, if you're going to make your movie over 2 hours long, it better be a goddamn good movie. Yeah, because like I am extremely sensitive to like, okay, this could be way shorter. Like you could
Transformers movies.
Well, oh my god. Well, the Transformers. If you can explain to me why there should be a Transformers movie that is longer than 80 minutes, I will pay you. There is no reason for a Transformers movie to be longer than 80 minutes.
Transformers movie after the first Transformers movie, then you're really cooking.
No, it's easy. It's just like want to make money, just like why they made a Battleship movie. Guaranteed return on investments, even as like it's a silly license as like Battleship. There's a reason why that they have like there's the Candyland movie in pre-production. Last I heard, they have like Adam Sandler sign on to do it.
Yeah.
Oh god! But you're gonna get Pauly Shore in there too.
That'll be great.
Here's the thing: you can do a Candyland movie if the movie is inspired by Candyland and not tries to be an accurate representation of a board game.
It should just be people playing the game.
The thing about Transformers movies is that they want to sell you the military. That's why they make all these movies, because as long as
recruitment films.
Just because they get a lot of money from the military to
pop culture.
Does anyone here share my sentiment about being like anti-military and stuff? I know.
I'm anarchist, so yeah.
A lot of guys there are like, it's bad, but it's like it makes people come together and stuff, and there's some honor about it. I don't know.
I think I'm kind of weird in that I'm not exactly a pacifist, but
I'm like 100% pacifist.
But
there's a story I need to tell, but like you can say I'll tell it afterwards.
I kind of hate what we do with the military and kind of have done for the most part, but I'm kind of edified by military stuff. I love tanks and I love, aircraft. And
I love games about military. It's fine. Nothing bad about that. Yeah. It's like...
awesome machines are awesome. It's
when machines are awesome. That's true,
the evil empire that kills brown
problematic.
People.
Yeah. That's why the ships in Star Wars still fight side to side when they're in space. They should just be like that.
It's easier on the technology budget too.
If you would tell that, Star Trek is probably worse about side to side things than Star Wars.
Except for Wrath of Khan.
Yeah, Wrath of Khan is Wrath of Khan acknowledges it, and then it's never mentioned again.
Like Z minus 10,000 meters.
Yeah, and then like it never happens ever again in any other Star Trek fight ever.
I mean, Discovery was better with that, but you can't see shit in Discovery, so why does it matter?
So I've actually watched documentaries about submarines during the Cold War, and actually there's a lot of comradeship between the U.S. sailors and the Russian sailors. The politicians don't talk about.
Yeah, that's probably true. But then, it was probably true like before. It was probably true in the Cold War because Cold War had some respect to it. No matter what, it had some respect to it, I believe.
I mean, there was like there was the First World War truce. All the soldiers were like, it's Christmas, and then they started talking to each other. It's like, wait a minute, why are we fighting? Because the soldiers are just like...
Yeah, and then came the Second World War, and it was like, your enemies are not humans. You must destroy them.
So, that was a bit more clear. Yeah.
That's why I'm afraid of war, because if it happens now, it will be dehumanizing.
Yeah. Speaking of which, anybody see the trailer for Greyhound?
I want to see it. I did. I want to see the movie. I'm actually looking forward to Greenland with Gerard Butler. Have anyone seen that one?
I personally don't need another. Here comes an asteroid. Here comes a comet. I mean, Deep Impact and Armageddon were plenty. Thank you very much.
Here comes an asteroid.
No, there's one asteroid movie that needs to be done. and it would be an adaptation from a book. If you ever read the Larry Niven book, it's Larry Niven and Jerry Pournelle, Lucifer's Hammer.
No,
I've heard of it.
What I like about it, it's not about it's basically there's kind of like two major acts and then sub acts, and the idea is that something's detected, it's coming, and then the first part is how is society reacting to this impending disaster? Because originally it's like, oh, it's going to come close, but it's going to be outside of the orbit of the moon. And then as they keep updating the orbit, it gets closer and closer. Then they're like, oh, it might hit us. And they're like, oh shit, it's definitely going to hit us. And then it hits. And then the second part of the book is basically dealing with society, the remnants of society and how they respond. And you get everything from the noble people who are trying to rebuild to the vultures who just want to go and like rob everything and kill and just take what they want and kill people to get it.
Guys, we need more movies like The Martian where, we have like some danger coming and scientists just do their stuff and do their work and it works.
I literally just watched that last night. And I just hugely entertained with, sciencing the shit out of this.
The best thing about this movie is that it's techno-positive. It's basically that there's this thing called science and it works. Maybe it's not technically accurate in every aspect, but the very idea of it. Have you ever seen the clips and the things that the astronaut Chris Hadfield does? I believe many of you did. And he's a very positive guy. He's like the idea of it. And I had a good chance of once in my life speaking to a real cosmonaut guy. And it was a very random thing. And I thought he would be very, very overwhelmed with all the questions, but then he was like, oh, you want to speak with me? You can speak with me. And we were talking for 2 hours and it was amazing.
That's terrific.
One of the good things about
good
things about going to Mars is that the Russians have a lot of experience with long duration space flight, starting in the 70s. So that would actually help us when we go to Mars.
And also living in an inhospitable environment, there's nothing to do.
Damn.
Well, the other thing too, I think would be so great about like a mission. You're really like the entire world. You get all the major powers and even the minor powers, wherever you can contribute. Because if humans were doing that shit and we're cooperating, we're far less likely to want to slaughter each other en masse.
Yeah, and that's one of that. I know not many people here are really into Elon Musk and SpaceX. I believe some are, but I know some random geek would tell me no, screw that, it's capitalism. But I think I really follow SpaceX and I follow a lot of that stuff. I follow Everyday Astronaut, that guy. And the one thing that Elon Musk is doing that is great is behind all this wall, on the other side of the world, probably, he's inspiring a lot of people. He's giving us hope. He probably inspired me to go into airspace. He probably inspired a lot of people in my university to go into airspace. Not all of them, probably, but a lot of them. And he gives us this idea that airspace can be cool once again. And we lacked that in Russia.
Yeah.
We lacked that.
That's good to hear.
See, I like the fact that he motivates people. The problem I have with him is he seems to be a bad engineer.
He's not an engineer at all, really.
He's just
hires engineers who know what they're doing.
That's the thing. He never builds anything. He never owns. He just owns things. He just grew up in
but it works.
He's an idea guy.
It doesn't work because it does.
Yeah. He has a degree in physics, but he apparently has not really done anything. And
he has a degree in being born to rich parents.
Yeah, I mean, the Hyperloop. The Hyperloop was an obviously bad. I get the impetus behind it, but just the whole idea. We're going to put people in a shell, in a vacuum tube that's not sealed anywhere. So we're going to have.
The very idea is that the next guy will come and he will look at it and he will say, "This doesn't work, but I have something that does." And then he comes and then he proposes his idea, and then the next person proposes his idea, and then it's just a big bubble. I mean, I will probably never own it. It's very expensive, and it's I know it's very cool for an electric car. It's much cooler than I will ever have. But then probably some people will build cheaper electric cars that are not as cool, not as amazing. They won't do 2 seconds to 100, but probably 6 seconds to 100, still better than the 11 I get. But it's just about being like the first guy to kick it off, and then people will follow in his footsteps.
My only problem with
I don't
Musk
care if
is
it's
that
Elon or not Elon, but somebody will.
I just feel like Elon Musk gives people who, I guess, quote unquote, may have autism a bad name, because I think he's very he's kind of a smart ass in a way. He also did that with his kid and named his kid that weird name, and it's like,
yeah, he's weird.
we're not all like that. Some of us are just. Some of us are quirky. That's cool.
Well, if you're going to go there, let's not forget Frank Zappa with Moon Unit and
Dweezil.
I just wanted to say real quick, now that you got Zoom, you're doing it differently than before. It's cool because it looks like the Brady Bunch.
Well, it's always been like this.
But again, there's
you could always do
better connects with the young people right now, because if you take my university, and it's like. It's Russia, it's not America, but my university, like the Moscow Institute of Physics and Technology, considered probably one of the best in the country. But all the people here, they are like openly liberal. Some of them are openly gay, some of them are anime fans, and they are not like ashamed of it. They paint their hair whatever color they like, and they walk in whatever clothes they like. They're extremely liberal. And
that's refreshing to hear.
It's encouraging.
And these guys, they are like when they get political, they are also liberal, and a lot of them want to leave Russia. And as for me, I don't want to get to United States ever, probably to Canada or New Zealand.
New Zealand,
I don't want to go to the United States.
Don't come to the US at the moment.
I don't get the idea of how can you get like internal division in your country and every single state is a different thing. If I go to Vladivostok, which is like 9 hours of flight away, it will still be Russia. But in America, it's like you go to the next state and it's different.
We're 50 small countries.
In some ways it is, yeah.
I know how
it was planned at the beginning, but then it became a single country.
Yeah. Oregon and Washington are pretty similar because Seattle and Portland are the same city. They're both on water, both in the Northwest. We just use a lot there. The same kind of like culture, rains a lot. And the rest of the state is just like redneck, like Trump supporting country as well.
Yeah,
that's true. I'm in Oregon. That's true. That's true.
That's kind of interesting because obviously, both, Washington and Oregon are both overall blue states, but it's like, so all the people in the cities are blue and everywhere else and like, okay,
everywhere else they're racist.
Those of you guys who know Jeff Shell too, he lives in New Jersey here with me. Now he's in northwestern New Jersey and it's rural, and rural New Jersey is just as Pennsylvania or fucking
guys, but then you have one thing that you should really think is important. As for me, I just thought about it for some time. What you have is pluralism. You have a two-party system.
Yeah.
Even if the second party is like the worst, it's still a good thing, because if you have only one party, like we do here, it's nothing stops those people from just taking your taxpayer money and doing whatever the shit they want.
You can vote for whoever you want, so long as you vote for me.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And, right now you have judicial.
You want to re-elect the person or no?
Yeah.
Hey, don't blame me. I voted for Kodos.
It's a good perspective to remind us Americans. I mean, look, I am registered with one of the two major parties. I'm registered Democrat, and I complain about the two-party system a lot, and there are a lot of things about it that I would like to change.
We should change it. We should collectively move our ass and change it.
But it's better. But it's better than a one-party system.
Yes, I mean, I have heard.
It's a good place to. It's like if we have to stay here for a little while until we. It's like okay, let's just it's better than a one-party system.
We could always still compare things to like Saudi Arabia or like North Korea or whatever is the worst.
And I'm not. I don't say that as an excuse not to do anything. I'm just saying, keep a perspective.
But it raises a good point though. And see, to me, what I always tell my friends who are eager for third and fourth and fifth parties, which I am in as well.
Yeah, for sure.
It's never going to happen until the focus stops being on the presidency. We need people. We need third and fourth and fifth people. Start in local government, start in state government, because you build. That's how you build grassroots, and then you act. Because once you start getting victories there, people go, oh, you know what? Maybe I will vote Green, or I'll vote, American Freedom Party, whatever, right wing, left wing, whatever they are.
Yeah, it has to start there. It has to start small.
I do have a question.
I have a question.
Go
Sorry,
ahead.
really
Go
quick.
Ahead. Go ahead.
I keep thinking, and I've talked to some other people who are fascinated by history about it, and they have no idea. How did we end up landing on the idea of a presidency anyway? Why didn't it just end up being parliamentary with a group rather than a single figurehead?
It was the compromise between no king and king.
France tried that after the revolution. You see how it turned out.
Well, we were before that.
Yeah, so. And the thing is, too,
we did it first.
The British parliamentary democracy actually came after us, did it not?
I don't know. I mean,
well, there was definitely the English Civil War, which was the English Civil War, the American Revolution, the French Revolution was part of the bourgeoisie revolution, the only actual revolution that changed the entire world, because it went for most of the world, most of the Western countries being from like monarchs to being like feudalism, as it were,
liberal democracies,
or liberal democracies.
But the thing is, though, is that our system was actually in part based on the British parliamentary system, and partly based on the Roman system. Mm-hmm. So the thing is, if you think about it, they the legislature in the UK is similarly divided. You have the House of Commons, which is like the House of Representatives, and then you have the House of Lords, and that's the Senate. That's the main difference. One of the main differences is that the Senate are elected as opposed to appointed. So because they did not want to have patricians who are like with hereditary titles and stuff like that. So and then of course you had the Roman Senate. The problem is the Roman Senate was not bicameral. You had the Senate and you had the consul and proconsul and eventually the emperor, but that was it. So they wanted the idea was to break things up and to have that, kind of the same way that in the UK system, the House of Lords is kind of the deliberative body, and the House of Commons is the reactionary body, because the House of Commons is, you have common elections. But they wanted to get away from the idea of governments breaking down all the time, because, well, we can't get a majority, we can't get a plurality, so, we need a new election, and they wanted something that was a bit more stable. And the thing is that, and the thing is, way back when the country started, we had multiple parties. There was 4, 5, 6, and 7.
Yeah.
And even if you look through the elections from the mid 1800s to the end of the 1800s, there was at least 3 and very often 4 candidates for president who got significant electoral votes. But the problem is, it's a numbers game. So because we don't seem to, or we weren't really good at forming coalition governments. So what ended up happening is that people, some parties went out, literally went bust. And some joined together to increase their political power. The problem is that those were groups that were more similar way back then than they are now. And so so if you look in both Democratic and Republican Party, you end up having people that they have certain things in common and a lot of things not in common. Like if you look at mainline Republicans versus libertarians that are in the Republican Party. The libertarians are like anti-state, and they look at, a lot of them look at Republican, your mainline Republicans is still way too statist for them, but because they share economic values, they tend to stick together. Because they know that, well, if I don't vote for that guy, that then my values are going to be even further pushed away by the people on the political left, as it stands in the U.S. And same thing here, and what the difference on the left is that we're so diverse that you got everything from like geek who's way communist to like blue dog Democrats who are like socially conservative, generally religious, but they still have the economic the kind of a liberal economic message of at least economic equality. And so, and that there's a lot of stuff that just doesn't mesh well, and people tend to be pedestrian and well, I'm not going to compromise with that person or that group or that thought, and then we don't get anywhere.
So as the only one that lives in Florida, what do you guys think about where I'm from?
I worry about you.
I'm personally thinking of that Bugs Bunny cartoon where he's got the sign and and Florida floats off into the Atlantic.
I worry about people that I know that live there. But I want to go back to a point about why we have a president, because there's something else that I think is relevant to what Tanya was asking. That I think the three different branches of government was a big deal to the founders when they were framing the Constitution. And in a parliamentary system, the prime minister is technically a member of the legislative branch because he still sits in the parliament. And in the American system, the president is not is the head executive of a separate branch of government. And I think because the founders were, as they were framing the Constitution, were incredibly sensitive to how suspicious everybody was of an authoritarian government, since they had just fought a revolution to get out from under the king. They wanted to design the government in a way that it could sort of keep an eye on itself. So that's why they defined three separate branches.
Yes, that's very important because when they
they did not
just take your money.
Yeah, and they did not intend them to be co-equal. They intended the legislature to be primary, to be dominant. I mean,
right, but that was part of the checks and that was part of the checks and balances. You know, the most of the power was invested in the legislative branch, but the chief executive was, like the president, was the head of state. You know, so, and the fact that the president was not a member of the legislative branch was important, just as the fact that the judicial.
They wanted to be able to stymie the legislature, but they still wanted the legislature.
Right, and also the fact that the president is not the only part of the executive branch. They're the head of the executive branch, but they're not. You know, like the sole member.
Right.
But yeah, and so you have that division of, you know, the legislature writes the laws, the executive upholds the laws, and the judicial interprets the law.
Right. And each
branch always gets me so pissed off when I hear right wing people say shit like, well, the job of the judicial is to uphold the law. No, because they're not there to be a rubber stamp for whatever the legislature does.
Right.
They're there to actually.
The white birds want them to be.
Their primary judicial job.
Mr. Barr, paging Mr. William Barr.
He's not part of the judicial branch though.
I know he is. He just thinks he is.
But the primary part of the judicial branch though is actually to hold the legislature accountable to the Constitution.
Yeah, exactly. And each branch in theory has a check on the other branches. You know,
it's funny how you have a place where all this theory actually works.
Well,
some way.
It works reasonably well for a long time, but
it works when people want it to work. Then you get
about suing the government.
It works when people aren't trying to make it not work.
Go ahead.
And when people are more interested in pursuing their own interests than they are the interests of the people they're supposed to serve.
Yeah.
Well, capitalists and always trains us to pursue our own interests. But Nick and Ed.
I've just been incessantly pointing and raising my hand for like 12
Sorry,
minutes I'm trying not to talk over people.
I thought you were counting things.
Okay, so
practicing your sign language.
So just a couple quick things I want to say. Steve talking about like the time, the runtime of movies. It just made me think of that fake intermission in the Holy Grail when they only were in it for like 30 seconds, so people barely got out of their seats before the movie resumed.
The movie trolled this audience, and it was perfect.
Yeah,
it was fit for that
great.
movie.
So I mentioned Armageddon. I want to say if I feel in the mood to watch Armageddon, I basically just look up the asteroid shots on YouTube and just watch a compilation of like every shot where the asteroid appears. That's like
I did like the speech in the movie, but then again, I'm like a sucker for that cheap ass kind of inspirational stuff.
This is our Independence Day.
Am I the only one who never watched the movie?
Also, Armageddon has some of the best montages. They're so cheesy.
Yes.
Let Nick finish.
I just wanted to give props to the visual effects artists of that movie because they took a space rock and they somehow made it scary. Every scene where you see it with like these tails that go on for like a mile, it look like tentacles. It's got this weird blue aura, schools of like little fragments going along it. The inside of it is basically hollow and it's all jagged. It really feels like this malevolent thing that was summoned from the depths of space specifically to snuff us out. How do you do
the art
that?
design on that was excellent.
Yeah, how do you make a rock seem evil? How do you characterize it?
You draw a face on it. I
Exactly.
but I know about the game called Majora's Mask.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It's funny because what was it, like 2 years after that? The movie The Fifth Element legitimately had an evil space rock.
Yes, that's right.
Way less scary than the one in Armageddon.
It is. I say Fifth Element's a better movie.
Although the one moment in that when they're attacking, the planetoid or whatever it is, and the skull face comes out straight at the general, and Corbin Dallas wakes up. I thought a terrific. That was well set up.
Fifth Element actually came out before Armageddon, a year before.
Oh, did it? Okay.
Yeah, I thought it did.
Yeah.
I knew it was close, but I thought it was the other way around.
Which is weird to me that Fifth Element was only 23 years ago, because it seems a lot longer to me than.
I agree.
I want to point out 2 movies in a row: Bruce Willis versus a giant space rock.
Yes.
Are you trying to tell me something?
Guys, okay, so I just wanted really, in my first conversation with to put this last idea, and we spoke about the military. I just had no time to get this idea to you, and there's one story I really want to tell. Like, really. I didn't put it in the Q&A, but I really want to put it here.
Go for it.
You just don't live in a country where the military service is compulsory. So there was this story, like within the last year, there was this guy in like a very far away division of the Russian military, like a regular soldier guy. So he did the shooting, and a shooting is a very bad, sensitive topic thing. But there are people who are really supportive of him right now, because it was found out that, Russian military system is basically very similar to a prison system. You get some people who are there for longer, some people who are there for shorter, and the people who are there for longer are doing all kinds of bad things to the people who are there for shorter, including something like an introduction rape. So that's what happened to that guy. And, the higher officials don't really want this information to spread to their higher-ups, because then they will be punished for it, and they just keep silent. And so this guy did a shooting. He took a machine gun and shot 5 people. He's really feels bad about shooting the 3 of them. They were like side casualties. He didn't want them to be dead because they were just there and got bullets. But the 2 guys who did this to this guy and those 3 like other guys, he really wanted to kill them, so he did. And that's an unsolved thing now. Shootings are considered a very bad thing in America, but I don't know if this situation is where it really gets gray. It gets really gray.
They're just normal here.
Yeah. And you're talking about a completely different circumstance.
Yeah.
Yes, I just wanted you to consider this and think about it. You talk about military, and you're not obliged to go there in America. Here it's not that hard to evade it. You just have to go to university. But if you don't, you just
the draft.
But the problem, yes, very true. It's been a voluntary army since Vietnam. However, military propaganda, as we mentioned with all the movies, Michael Bay, the Transformers, so many different movies,
I just don't know what to think about that guy. Is he right? Is he wrong?
The thing is also Mike Moore showed this in his 9/11 documentary movie about how they recruit basically the poor people. They will go to Walmart and stuff like that, and they will talk to the guys, and you see it on film. 2 recruiters are talking about, hey, do you know that reggae artist is Shaggy? He was in the Marines and stuff like that. Why don't you join the Marines and be just like Shaggy? And it's just so you selling the idea of being the few, being the proud, being the Marines,
being employed in this desperate.
That's the other part.
Exactly.
In the case of before it was a voluntary army, I lived through that, and not just through the draft, but when they decided that they were going to, make things a little less random by issuing numbers based on your birthday. And anybody care to guess what the number that I drew?
69.
69. 69, 420.
Bless your heart.
56. I was going to be cannon fodder, and being that it took me 5 years to get through Case, the 5th year I was at Case, I was not 1S. 2S. I was 1A. And I was scared out of my wits.
Yeah, I'll bet.
You know, and the only thing that saved me was the one smart thing that Richard Nixon did during his 2 terms as president. He stopped the draft.
Yeah.
Well, the other thing too that gets me, the fact that obviously the poor and particularly ethnic minorities are make up a disproportionate amount of the military. That I always get into the arguments with these racist and so-called race realists that try to say, well, black people are 13% of the population and they're like 35% of the people in jail. And I'm like, yeah, we're also almost 40% of the people in the military. We don't seem to complain about that.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, it's if I can interject, I guess. I'm sorry. Well, it's a sense of disposability. It's like if that poor person is dying, that's one less person on welfare. I mean, Tupac said it in one of his songs. It's like one ugly less kid on welfare. So it's kind of like they want poor people to go because we don't want to deal with you. So at least you can go do something meaningful,
useful for us.
Yeah.
You might die. And we won't.
Yeah, we just enslaved our own people. We don't need ethnic minorities for that.
I mean, I was almost recruited by a bad army recruiter who used to be a retired army soldier. They get a bonus of like $5,000 if they successfully get a recruitment. So this army recruiter wanted me to lie about my egg allergy, which is one of the things that you can't qualify you for armed services of any kind, even Coast Guard and National Guard. And so I did eventually came forward because my dad did not want me to go to the army without them knowing I'm allergic to eggs. And so that guy's in jail now.
That's something else to talk about. Like we were talking earlier about, the framing of the Constitution, how things were back at the beginning of the country. That was something else that the founders of the United States were extremely ambivalent about, which even having a standing army.
Yes, exactly.
I mean, they didn't have a standing army.
There was no standing army for a very long time, and there was only an army if they needed one to go do something.
In fact. After the drawdown after World War II, kind of started to draw a little bit back up during Korea. And then they went to the pentatonic army because basically their feeling was, well, we have nukes now, we'll just nuke everybody. So they drew down, and it wasn't until Vietnam, and basically since Vietnam, that we've had a large standing army since then.
Yeah.
And that's what gets me about conservatives, because the conservative position for 200 plus years was always no, don't have a big military because that's the arm, that's the force arm of the government.
Right.
And so as long as we keep the army small, we don't have to worry about tyranny. But somewhere along the line, it became totally fine with tyranny.
As long as they were the ones sitting at the top.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Well, so
let Joe McCory go. He had his hand up.
Okay.
Also, the percentage with prisons and the army brings up an interesting point. I've talked to not only recruiters but also people that have gone into the army, and there is a disturbing percentage of people that volunteer to go into the army instead of going to jail or prison, because that's often the choice.
Yeah, the Hobson's choice. I mean, you can go on the pokey, or you can become the few of the proud.
Exactly.
Which really puts a little bit of a thing on the volunteer army.
Plus the fact that we know from lots of studies that the jails are filled with a lot of people who do have mental diseases, mental illnesses, who are untreated.
Yeah.
And so of course, if that's who you're, and that's where a lot of crime, that's a lot of people, because if you're in bad socioeconomic conditions and you don't have healthcare, you don't have anything else, you're very more likely to turn to crime. But then, so then you take somebody now who may not be, in a good situation, and you're gonna throw them in the military. Here's a gun, and we're gonna teach you to kill people. Also, I think that the other thing too is the way that they do it. We talked about the dehumanization. They did studies after World War II where they found that most people that were even if they were well armed, didn't actually shoot at people. They just kind of shot.
Yeah, I've seen that video. I've seen that study. It's
because the idea of killing it, it's kind of built into us not to kill one another.
SLA Marshall, Men Under Fire.
Right.
Yeah.
So
goes back thousands of years.
And then they started training people to actually
they
shoot
started
people.
realizing that, okay, you basically, if you could get someone to dehumanize that person they were shooting at, they were far more likely to actually be able to shoot at them. And so both the British and Americans especially, and I don't know about other countries, but I know those two, that became a big part of the regimen, is to actually get the mindset of that's not a human, it's a target.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Isaiah, go.
Yeah. Well, so I think my first experience with distrusting the military on a cultural level came in 2012 when I remember when I was working at the IMAX. I worked at a theater. They had showed us a propaganda film for Honor Flight, which is where they send a bunch of veterans to like go up to the memorials in DC. And I remember one of the guys was talking about the atomic bombings of Japan, and they tried really, really hard to explain why the nuclear bombing was justified. Even though the firebombing had killed far more people, the nuclear bombing was justified. And then they segued to modern day, where basically it was a bunch of soldiers over in some foreign land fighting, and then back at home, the story of the war was being told by a bunch of Stepford wives and fawning idiots who just was just like, yeah, well, my husband, he's in like Iraq or someplace, but I'm just sitting here just looking cute and proud, and God bless our troops. And I was like, this is stupid.
I just before I forget, I just have,
I'm sorry.
Again, two little things. One, I wanted to say that at that size, Worf's head looks like a walnut.
He has. It does look like a walnut. He does have a walnut forehead ridge, doesn't he? Sorry, Worf.
Like next to a real human seal head, like that. Anyway, just a comparison shot. Okay, so the other thing I want to say, this is something I wanted to bring up much earlier in the stream. Sorry to dial us back.
It's okay.
It's fine.
Never mind. I'll let Joe.
Oh,
okay.
No,
go ahead.
Finish your
Again,
thought.
it's about games that can't quite decide whether they're games or movies. So The Last of Us 2 recently released, and I've realized that both of those games are so far up their ass. Because I remember, for one thing, the first game ends with like this hospital scene where they might be able to cure the zombies, but
and you not spoil it, please. I haven't completed it.
All right. Let me just say,
I haven't played it either.
I remember so many people back in the day when the first game released saying that they would have done the ending differently if it had given them the choice, but it doesn't, because they had to have their edgy sequel where they try to teach you about consequences for your violence in the first game when they forced you to do that. This is the problem with the game. If a game really wanted to like make the player question their choices, they would have given you the choice to work around the violence and then have those choices carry over to the second game. But no, the second game, it constantly critiques itself and about, revenge is bad, okay? And it basically, 90% of the game's mechanics are you violently murdering people. And then it wags its finger at you, the devs do, for playing the game the way it was designed and intended to be played. Just like the only way to win the game is to just not play it.
Right. Just like war games. The only winning move is not to play.
Yeah.
To Isaiah's point about the indoctrination.
Do you remember that the Next Generation episode with Data just playing this game against that other very smart alien guy, and just keeping it longer and longer and longer and not winning.
Yeah, play for a stalemate.
That guy just got exhausted.
Yeah.
What were you
go ahead, Sirius.
What were you going to say, Sirius?
Yes, finish your thought.
So about Isaiah's point about indoctrination and propaganda. I mean, one thing that's happened in my lifetime, I saw this happen from when I was a kid, and and it's moved on since, is the canonization of anyone in a uniform. The idea it's a hard job, and so whatever they do in the service of that job is justified because it's stressful and so forth and so on. And the thing is, again, all of those jobs are voluntary. And yes, while they're certainly can be very difficult, you've chosen to do it, for the most part. And the thing is that just because you've done this doesn't mean that there's no accountability, but it's literally like, they're having a rough day every day. So if they pop off and do something, and what's really bizarre and perverse to me now is we've gotten to the point where with police, we are more willing to justify the police actions than we are of the active military. So people are actually in a war where people are actually shooting at them on a regular basis and trying to blow them up. But then, in the military, there's accountability. But with police, you see it every time that somebody who's unarmed gets killed, there's always the people that come out of the woodwork to justify it. Like, they talked back to the cops, okay, or they resisted.
He was running away.
Or running away, or
deserves
whatever,
to die,
or whatever horseshit that they want to throw in there.
Guilty people shouldn't be killed by cops either. You finish your point.
Well, exactly, right. And that's my point but even when they didn't do anything, like John Crawford, he wasn't breaking any laws. He had a toy gun in a store that sold toy guns in a state where it would have been perfectly legal to walk around the store with a real gun. And earlier that year, a bunch of armed, camouflaged white dudes did exactly that, and none of them got ambushed by the police and killed. But the idea that people were afraid, like, well, that's not good enough reason, to just do that. But we've been so beaten into us that the cops are good. Everyone in the uniform is a good guy. Yeah. And the same thing with the military. Think about what happened when Abu Ghraib broke. How many people made excuses for that shit? Now, at least in the military, there's accountability. So, so the people who did it, their commanders, a whole chain of command was washed out because they said you guys screwed up and allowed this shit to happen.
Does having accountability justify killing people?
No.
People who are probably drafted in another country.
But at least the military actually still has the accountability. But in the police, there's almost none.
I just have one thing to add to what you're saying that I think perfectly illustrates that. Also, sorry for all the typing. I thought my mic was muted. Okay, so there was this one story where this guy who was a veteran, he had been in the military. He was now a cop. And apparently their training is better. He applied his training to actually de-escalate things and determine if someone is dangerous or not. And he was dealing with this guy who was in a backyard. He was waving his gun around. It was obvious to this ex-soldier that this was suicide by cop. The guy was trying to goad him into shooting him. Right. And he exercised restraint. He didn't get all jumpy. He didn't lose his cool. He tried to calm the guy down. And it actually might have worked. But then another cop whizzed around the corner, popped the guy in a second. And just looked at the ex-soldier like, what the hell, man? Why didn't you put that guy down sooner? And then the police chief basically kicked the guy out because he didn't look out for his fellow cops.
Yeah, I was going to guess that he got fired for not killing the guy.
And this is the dangerous thing about this brotherhood amongst them, because soldiers, it makes sense for them to have brotherhood because they're in a strange land and they gotta look out for each other. They could die at any moment. But with cops, when they think of each other as family, that turns them into an in-group, and it turns the rest of us into an out-group. It alienates them.
Yeah, and it also turns them into a cabal.
Yeah, right. It makes it so they can't relate to the average person anymore. When we're not enemy combatants, they're not in a war zone.
Right. It's almost like that's the point of the police.
Oh, yeah.
Well, anyhow, you have a difference between the police and the military.
I was watching something recently where basically it was it was something that happened historically, but it was within the last 20, 25 years. And so some guy kills a cop, so the cops are after him, and basically 400 cops chased the guy. They investigated, they found who it was right away. They chased the guy down, blah blah blah. They eventually took the guy into custody. But I was thinking, and what got me there's two things I took away from the whole thing is that, so it shows that if they actually give a shit, they can find murderers if they actually try. Yeah. If they devote resources and make that a priority, because they can actually do it, but they don't because they care way more about themselves than the rest of us. But also, what got me is that we're listening to these cops talk about, one, their desire to blow the guy away, and then the cop at the end who was the presenter basically saying, yeah, we could have blown him away and basically gotten away with it, but we didn't, and how lucky that guy was. And I'm like, no, you assholes, you're not supposed to be fucking blowing people away. If you're able to take them into custody, that's what you're supposed to do. That's your job. You're not the jury. You're not judge, jury, and executioner. You're not fucking Judge Dredd. But this guy acted like, wow, we did this great, it's amazing. We did this great and terrible thing of taking the guy into custody. I'm like, you're fucking warped, dude.
Yeah, that's not your job.
I just think the story I brought up, it just perfectly illustrates the difference between police training and military training.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so I want to wrap up the stream, but if now it's officially over. No, but Julian, did you have something you wanted to add before we?
Yeah, just I mean, so I guess circling back to
that's no problem.
The point about sort of The Last of Us.
Yeah,
because I'm playing the second one now. I mean, I always thought of that as right. There's this whole sort of genre of, I think of this sort of complicity shaming art. I mean, film, right? Like maybe the most obvious example is Michael Haneke's Funny Games, which is a movie about.
Oh yeah, I know about
right. Sort of implicating the audience in its enjoyment of the sort of extreme violence. Spec Ops: The Line in games.
Oh, I love that game.
Really good example.
And there is this sort of reasonable criticism, right? Which is, well, you're making us you're not giving us an option, so that as a critique of the viewer or the player, right? This is sort of defanged a little, or it doesn't seem fair. But I think it works better if you think of it kind of situated
critique of the game,
the genre, as a critique of the genre, and in a sense, right, your choice to go see that kind of movie, your choice to go play that kind of game. And the second Last of Us, I just actually really love the way it executes this. First, just by doing sort of the stealth action violence, but making it just really unpleasant in a way that most games don't. Right? You don't feel like you're cool, sexy killer so much when you're doing it. You're stabbing people and you see them kind of gurgle, and it's just really kind of horrifying. And also the way they sort of personalize the kind of moots, right? As you're playing through, you're doing a kind of stealth section. You're going out, taking out these sort of, I guess, malicious people in this post-apocalyptic scenario. As you take someone down, it's not just, another guy's down. It's they start saying, Kyle, where's Kyle? Has anyone seen Sharon? Where did she go? Sharon, oh my God. So they all have individual names.
Yeah.
And so you get this, kind of really eerie sense of, this is a person with friends who are going to miss them. Anyway, that was all.
And this is painful. I wouldn't play that.
Serious Mind really quickly, and then Isaiah has something to show us, and then we're going to end this goddamn stream.
This is why Social Justice Alchemy is 3 hours long.
Go ahead.
To Julian's point, this is one. To me, I think the one, and maybe not only, but probably the most legitimate criticism of drone warfare, because a lot of people get obsessed with it's a drone. Bombing people, whether the pilot's there or distance, is you're still killing people, and actually drones have a lower collateral damage rate. The biggest problem I see with drones isn't them from a functional perspective, but it's that it gets into the whole dehumanization part, because not only are you not there, so you're even though it apparently seems to have a psychological effect on people doing it, but it's certainly less because they're not literally in peril, because they're not right where it's happening.
Yeah.
And then it does viewing through a camera and not their own eyes, so it dehumanizes the people on the ground.
I had that idea about the war
doesn't
of the
just
future.
it doesn't just dehumanize, it decouples you from the event.
Right.
And in fact, it's
any physical sensation.
Imagine just this picture. Imagine this like a Pacific Ocean. And there's this place where nobody is. And there's these two armies of robots. Some of them are flying. Some of them are skimming across the surface of the ocean. Some of them have these weird running things, just really weird looking robots coming at each other and fighting each other. And that's all. Imagine this war of the future where killing humans is considered a war crime, which you get trial for. But the money is still spent. But then it's just robots fighting robots. And
that sounds like a cool movie.
It's been a movie more than once.
They have these it's like a sports,
Yeah.
And it's interesting. Anybody remember the end of Patton? When Patton was riding his horse and he's being interviewed, and they're talking about the wonder weapons, and he says, "I failed to see the wonder in them," because he saw this coming.
Yeah. Okay, Isaiah, you wanted to show us something.
Yeah, so first of all, does Lauren know that, do we all know that the cops were even assholes even before the video? Because I just watched a documentary about 1968, And the cops were big assos even then.
I think they've pretty much always been.
You're talking about Chicago and Daly, right?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, forever, all over.
The thing you have to keep in mind about Chicago is that was under Richard J. Daly, and that was the Chicago machine, which was in place for longer than you even want to begin to guess at. He controlled Chicago like damn few cities ever had been. And that was a large portion of the reason why that happened.
Well, okay. Isaiah, just talk to any black person over 70 and they'll tell you.
Right. Okay. So, Isaiah.
So I'm building a Star Trek LCARS personal data computer here. So
that's nice.
Nice.
There we go.
So can you get it a bit higher? Is it like a laptop?
It's from the so a guy actually it's a like a Packard from 1994.
Oh yeah.
So a friend of mine gave this to me, so I just wanted to make like a Star Trek personal.
So was it like a real prop from the
That's really cool
generation? Did it show up anywhere?
No,
is it like a stylized thing?
This is like more of a stylized thing.
It's amazing. I just remember
it looks really
these pads in the next generation everywhere.
Yeah,
which are like modern tablets, except like more primitive.
Yeah, they handed them to each other like they were pieces of paper, but they were supposedly tablet
they
computers.
had replicators. Why wouldn't they?
The latest RPG book for Star Trek is written in the same style, except it makes it really hard to read because it's white text on black background, which is painful on the eyes, and also because the background is black, like you're.
The computers back in the 90s were all like white on black or white on blue.
Better than like the yellow on the blue.
That's awful.
Yeah. Okay. So
green on black.
Everybody, shut up. I'm going to end this stream now. I love you all. I'm so grateful that you could be here. But now it's time for it to end.
Thank you.
Steve has work to do.
I have shit to do. Actually, I'm recording. Jason and I are recording the podcast today. So I've been negligent. I have to write my notes for the movie review. So I actually have some shit to do. But anyway, so thank you. Thanks to everybody for watching. First of all, don't forget the charity links in the description of the video. Don't forget patreon.com/Steve Shives if you want to help me out. And we'll be back in a month to do this again. Thanks to everybody who is on the call with me. You're all awesome people. I couldn't do this without your support.
Really? That's a long time.
You'll have to.
This is why John Broadman and I does a podcast each week of social justice alchemy.
Some random geek will love my idea this month because some random geek hates authority, and so basically the only guy because of who we have to end this is Steve. So you hate authority, some random geek, and let me just think about
authority.
It. Do we really need him? Is it
technology-wise? He's the host of the call, and he's running the stream on the YouTube channel. So it's just like
still streaming.
If you didn't have my platform to co-opt, what would you do? All right, I'm going to take us off the air now. Thanks to everybody for watching. We'll see you next month.